Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Welcome back, friends. Today we took a short drive to Minneapolis. Actually, it took way too long. I'm 20 minutes late to hang out with a fellow artist, although a different medium and a much more accomplished artist at that. Our guest today is originally from Pittsburgh, I think, but eventually found a home in my area, the Midwest. His creations with clay are truly unique, which is why I set this interview up. I found him on the gram and I was like, dude, I've never seen any pottery like yours. Anyways, I've come to see the man behind the work. Welcome to the show, Brett Freund. It's not spelt that way, though, so you kind of caught me off guard. But yeah, welcome to the show, Brett Freund, aka Be Friendly.
Yes, thank you. Welcome to Minneapolis. I'm glad you made it. It's nice that you were so close.
Yeah.
So my last name is spelled Freund, which is German for friend.
Oh, that's why. Okay, because I was like Freundly. I thought it was funny. But
there's not a lot of Freunds around. And when I do meet one, there's always like a little bit of like a squinty eye, like friend or Freund. And I guess, we're just saying the American or the English definition of the word. But if I was in Germany, my whole name would be Brett Freund. I've been told.
Yeah. Have you been to Germany?
I have not. No, I'd love to go, but I took German like first grade to my senior year of high school.
Oh, okay. So you know quite a bit, or you did know quite a bit.
I did know quite a bit.
Yeah, I took Japanese for 4.5 years, and like I don't remember hardly any of it. I went to Japan like 6 years ago, which would have been, I don't even know, 5+ years after high school anyways. Yeah. And I could read some of the basic signs, but that's about it. Anyways, getting back to it, in your own words, who are you and what are you passionate about?
So I am a ceramic artist. That's probably been my longest passion ever since high school. I used to be passionate about staying up really late at night.
Working?
Usually working in the studio, yeah. And now I'm more passionate about getting up really early in the morning. So
you became a morning person.
I became a morning person.
Why? What triggered that?
I think I just like get done more in the morning now.
Yeah.
Opposed to the evening. The evening was always like you could work in the studio, but there would always be like a lot of distractions as well.
Yeah.
In the morning, I think it's like just more pure me time. So like I can work in the studio, I can get things done. Sometimes I can't sleep and I wake up and I just start making soup.
Yeah.
Or like start putting dishes away in the kitchen, which always kind of wakes up my wife.
Yeah. Well, I imagine. Plus, I mean, when you're working on stuff in the evening, the temptation to drink a beer is there versus like in the morning, the temptation for most of us isn't quite as prevalent. So it's like coffee typically. Right. I do a lot of my editing in the morning. Well, actually, I've gotten in a really bad habit. I got myself a hot tub when I got divorced because it was like, I deserved this. Well, I didn't, but I felt like it.
Yeah, so, of course. You deserve a hot tub.
Yeah, right. So I got one and I do work on it. But I wake up, I pour my coffee, bring a little Google Home speaker out to it because it's on my three-season porch. And then I sit in my hot tub and like listen to music. But really, that's when I answer all my emails and like respond to every DM and all my Instagram stuff. I'll sit there like in the morning, spend an hour working on it. So I do get some work done. And then if I can get myself out of my hot tub, which is a struggle every single time, it's like most people struggle to get out of bed. It's me struggling to get out of the stupid hot tub. And then I can sit, like I'll take a shower and I'll sit down at my coffee table and do all my editing because editing is like my least favorite thing to do.
Oh, sure.
Although it's like the most time consuming part of creating this, but unfortunately, it's just how it goes. Anyways, for people to be able to see what your work looks like, I don't even remember how this connection came about, honestly. Somebody mentioned they knew a bunch of people in the Twin Cities and sent me your profile. But if people are going to go try to follow you, see the work that you did, if after this episode, they're like, Chris just cut him off during this answer of a question, I need to know the answer. Like, how would they reach out to you?
The best way to do it would be through Instagram. Everything I do is through Instagram. So like all of my announcements, all the shows that I'm involved with, I routinely put up links to anything that I'm doing on Instagram, but you would go to Be Friendly, Freund, Ly. So that's always the best way.
Yeah. I mean, Instagram, I talk about it a lot on the show, but it's like the most powerful tool that could be also horrible, but it's kind of crazy though, for like artists, there isn't like before Instagram, you would be in such a more difficult position to be able to get your artwork to people and for people to see it. You kind of before that would have had to get a hold of the people that are doing the art shows and convince them that, hey, my stuff's cool. Nowadays, if you just have people buying your stuff on Instagram and you have people following you on there, it's like, here's my portfolio. This is how many people you can expect are going to want to come see what's here. You know what I mean? It just like is a lot easier to work with that way.
Yeah, I think like when I first got into ceramics or started doing ceramics seriously and was trying to sell work, it was still at a time like I graduated from undergrad in 2005.
Yeah.
And that was still at a time where like a lot of craftspeople and ceramic artists were doing craft shows and I think like that seemed like the best way to, you know, reach an audience, certainly like gallery exhibitions.
Yeah.
But you know, now you just do everything yourself and you can reach a lot of people really quickly through Instagram or other, you know, social media things. I do try to keep a balance though, because I do know people who have galleries and there's people who do things in the real world who, you know, I enjoy their company and their friendship. So I also try to like divvy out some work to other places as well to keep it kind of like in the real world. So it's not just constantly everything's online.
Well, and you're by yourself all the time working. You don't really want to be yourself, like by yourself all the time. You want to get out into the public space and be like a human periodically, I imagine.
Yeah. I think that's important. There have been like whole weekends where I'll just like get in the studio. This was in the past when I was younger. These were the days when I was, you know, spending lots of time late at night working in the studio. But I've gone like 3 days without talking to people working in the studio before. And then, you know, after a while, I'm like, I better, you know, reach out to somebody and make sure like there wasn't a zombie apocalypse or something.
You know? Yeah. You got to get into the real world for sure. I just like sign up for way too many things is my problem because I have a physical store location, like a retail store. I'm around people all the time in that realm, but then I'm doing the interviews, but then I'm trying to do all the editing too. And it was kind of a crazy moment the other day. So now that I'm doing audio and video as well, right? I have to try to link the audio to the video, which if there's any kind of hiccup or if I have to take a pause, now it's like off again. And that's a whole thing. But I spent like 20 minutes trying to line up the audio with this video. And I felt like it was wrong. I felt it was wrong. I asked my partner, Bree, to look at it. She's like, you're crazy. This is like exactly on. I don't know what you're talking about. I found after that, a friend of mine, while I was still kind of looking at it, friend of mine I hadn't seen in a few years, came into my shop just to come and say what's up, because that's what happens. I'm like in a public space. So people are like, oh, I haven't seen Chris in a while. Come say hi. So he came and he was kicking it. And I found myself watching his mouth. And I'm like, your audio seems off. And I'm like, no, that's obviously on. I like gotten such a crazy point of it because I was so hyper focused that it was like really messing with me. Anyway, so you're from Pittsburgh. Yeah, that's what you said? Yeah,
so I grew up in Pittsburgh. When I grew up in Pittsburgh, you know, it was mostly the 90s. I was there for the 80s too. I remember when the Pittsburgh in the 80s was like big hair.
Yeah.
And like, you know, like ripped acid wash jeans. But that was like
Steel Panther.
Yeah, that was like you know, most of my like I became conscious of the world as a teenager in the 90s.
Yeah.
When I grew up in Pittsburgh, it was still like very rusty. A lot of the old steel mills that used to line the rivers in Pittsburgh were still there. And like everything in Pittsburgh was about, you know, like there was this constant ghost of a whole like workforce lost their jobs, and like a little bit like growing up in Pittsburgh, you always felt like you had to leave. Like you went through school and like they're like, someday you'll graduate high school and then you must spread your wings and fly and like leave the city. So I still have like some connections to Pittsburgh, and I go back every so often.
Yeah. I mean, we had something similar in Eau Claire where I'm from, you know, a lot of the workforce was we were talking off mic about Banbury Place. It was the old Uniroyal tire factory that employed a huge part of Eau Claire at the time. When that went out of business, all these people got laid off. Real estate got dirt cheap.
Oh yeah.
That's when my parents moved there. That was why. But even just being here and my friend Charlie Flatten's here, who you just met, he's taking some photos and stuff. He's graduating college right now. It's that whole conversation of like, okay, yeah, you got to get out. If you want to
Right.
do something in a creative world in any kind of way, it's like you got to get out of Eau Claire at some point. And it's the whole spread your wings mentality. So people a lot of times move to Minneapolis at least for like a year. But what I find is after they're like, a couple years in, they're like, dang, I want to buy a house and I want to have kids. They end up coming right back.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Pittsburgh, since I've left, especially through like, even when I left undergrad, which was the last time I lived in Western Pennsylvania, it's changed a lot, and it's become a pretty, like, it's kind of a hip place now.
Yeah.
A lot of like the old neighborhoods in Pittsburgh that still have some of those like early 1900s charm still exist. And,
Sure.
and a lot of them have been like fixed up and turned into nice homes and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's definitely a place worth checking out if you're ever in that part of the country.
Yeah. So you were born in 83, correct?
Yep.
And then I read a different interview you had sent me that was a couple years ago, but it said you moved to Minnesota in 97. That means you were still in high school, correct? Or no?
No, maybe, I don't know. That could have been a typo. I moved here in 2016.
Oh,
or 15.
You were in Pittsburgh all the way until 2016?
So it's kind of, I had like a long meandering, like 20s. Which is pretty common for ceramic artists in the United States. So I went to undergrad and
like for pottery or for what?
Well, I did ceramics in high school.
Right.
I was my sophomore year of high school, ceramics just popped up on my schedule and I didn't even know what that was. Like my mom had to tell me what ceramics was and she's like, it's pottery. And I was like, oh, okay, well I do know what that is.
Yeah.
So I pretty much immediately became addicted to ceramics in high school, and I did it all the remaining 3 years of high school. And I did some stuff with like a community art center where I would go.
What was it when you were that young because that's like not the common thing for a 15-year-old boy to be like, I'm obsessed with pottery. What was it about that anyways when you first discovered that you liked in particular?
I think it's kind of like ceramics is a bit of a world where you can do whatever you want. No one's going to tell you that like you've come up with the wrong answer.
Like skateboarding in a way, in that way.
Sure,
for
yeah.
Me, yeah.
And, like any other class you take, math or stuff like that, you can come up with the wrong answer. And people love to tell you have the wrong answer. But in ceramics, it's, it was more of an exploration. And I did think that when I did a lot of like functional stuff, like a lot of vessel-based stuff in high school, more than I did sculptural
like bowls
things
and stuff. Or
yeah,
what do you mean? Okay.
like
vases.
Right, like I only ever threw on the wheel once in high school. Most of it was like coil building, slab building, pinch pots, which are kind of like the three basic ways of hand building without the use of a pottery wheel.
Sure. Well, so do you get the clay and it's like in a flat thing and then you use a knife to cut it out and you pinch it? Like I don't know anything about pottery at all beyond like little kid stuff.
So like, so you can buy a bag of clay. You can mix your own.
Okay.
You need extra equipment to do that, but you can buy a bag of clay and usually it comes in a 25-pound block. Sometimes it's square, usually it's rectangle.
Yeah.
And then from there, you just grab a clump and you can roll out a slab and you can, almost like carpentry, you can cut up slabs and create bevels and edges and, build forms from there. It's useful for like geometric forms, but it doesn't have to be geometric.
Sure.
Pinch pots are just when you take a lump of clay and you stuff your thumb down in the center and then start pinching along the walls until it sort of opens up into a vessel. And then coil building, coil building's really versatile. You can make large work with it. You can make small work with it. Like you can do like a lot. Like if I was going to do a hand build a vase, I would probably use a coil building method.
What is it? I'm confused. Like
so,
I kind of picture it in my mind.
So you're just rolling out coils. You know, if it's like a kid's class, they'd like to call them snakes, which, I don't know why we're lying to the kids out there. They're not snakes. They're coils.
Sure. But when you say snakes, now I can picture it. So that helps.
And then you sort of just like use those coils to build up level by level, some sort of vessel form.
Yeah. I see what you're saying now.
Or even like you could like build a tomb and put a body in it.
Sure.
Or and
you
like,
seal in the freshness with the clay.
Yeah, like I think like they've done that with like mummies. Like
oh, cool.
But so
But anyways, getting back to what you really liked about it was that it was just total freedom, right? There was nobody
freedom.
telling you like you couldn't do this, that, or whatever. Was your teacher pretty open about like, because you know some teachers are like you have to do specifically this project, this project, this project. When you were in it, did you kind of have freedom to explore and stuff? Or?
Well, we had assignments that we followed every. Right. I don't know how long we would get like a really long time to work on assignments, and they kind of were just going through the different processes of how you build something.
Sure.
So the emphasis being on like coils or pinch pots or whatever.
Yeah.
My teacher was kind of, you think of like a ceramics teacher or even like a high school arts teacher as being like a chill, laid back hippie person.
Yeah.
My teacher was kind of, I don't want to say strict, but he definitely like had a fine line, that you didn't want to cross. I think he was like ex-military, like maybe
pottery is like doesn't
maybe even
compute.
like maybe even like Army Reserves or something like that.
Yeah,
but
okay.
like
He had structure was like based,
And so like he like I could go into his class and I could work, and I didn't have to talk to anybody, and no one necessarily had to talk to me.
Sure.
Like I could be in my own world. But at the same time, like if I was skipping classes, or if he saw me skipping classes, or if he didn't show up for class, like he knew when you were skipping other people's classes. He knew like
sure.
He was like on top of it, making sure you were on top of it too. So,
sure.
Which is not like the high school art teacher stereotype.
Right.
So.
But yeah, so you had freedom to be able to make a lot of things. What was you still had structure, but you were able to kind of have that freedom within clay of like, this is something that I'm not doing wrong. I can just kind of do my own thing and have some kind of expression versus like math. Brett doesn't have his own math. Math
right.
is just math. There's no uniqueness to any of that type of a thing. What was your favorite thing? Like as far as like things that you made at the time growing up, like I can think of some stuff I made in art class that when I was at that age, I was like, dude, this is tight. And I had it at my parents' house or whatever. What was your first thing you can remember making that you were kind of stoked on?
I made like a South American wedding vessel that I thought was really interesting because it's kind of like it's a utilitarian pouring vessel.
Okay.
I think traditionally the idea was that, it's almost like a vase with two openings or spouts.
Yeah, okay.
And the vessel is actually divided, and one side holds water and the other side holds wine. So like if you're having like a celebration,
sure.
you have one vessel you can pass around that holds both water and wine. I don't know if that's historically accurate. That's just what I remember.
Sure.
And I kind of remember that being technically challenging, but also kind of like an interesting concept for an object that wasn't just a straightforward vessel. I mean, that was one of the things I really liked about ceramics is that it also, in my mind, my high school brain, I thought it would be practical. Like I go out to the world, make all my own cups. Everybody needs cups. Everybody needs plates and bowls, which they do, but they're not always going to a handmade potter to fill their kitchen with, unfortunately.
Most people aren't trying to spend that. They want to get whatever the mass-produced thing is and say, okay, well, for $40, I have this entire set. Tight.
Right.
Like you can't get something handmade for that unless you're paying yourself less than what the materials cost.
Yeah.
So.
And I wouldn't blame someone for, sometimes handmade stuff is really expensive. And
yeah, but I mean, that's anything, right? Like not everyone is going to have an original painting from one of their favorite artists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a lot of people like to have a couple, nice, expensive paint, pieces of art. Shouldn't say expensive, but you know what I mean? Like real pieces of art that aren't mass produced at Pier 1.
Yeah.
But they can't necessarily afford to decorate their whole home. I trade with people a lot. So I have way more original art than anyone else that I've ever met hanging in my house, which I'm like pretty proud of, but I'm like the exception. I spend way too much money on art.
I think like, I didn't grow up in a family that was necessarily like artistic.
Yeah.
Like I had some family members who did some music and some woodworking and other things, but that was kind of like, like my grandmother's siblings.
Sure. Yeah. No one close.
But I think a lot of people, or I've seen like a lot of people have that like one mug or cup or that they bought at either like some sort of craft store or at a crafts fest. Like even my mom, when I got into college and I started doing ceramics in college, my mom pulled out like this teapot from the 70s that she had bought when she was in college. Like, I didn't even know it existed. I think it was like down in the basement somewhere, or like hidden in our cupboards. And
Sure.
And like she pulled it out, and I was like, wow, we've had this the entire time, you know?
Sure.
So it's common if you like get in people's cupboards, you'll find that one ceramic object.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you don't have to make them for everyone, right? That's not the point of being an artist anyways.
Right.
So as you got out of high school, then you had been doing it for a few years. When you went into college, was that like, I guess at what point did you have the thought process you want to pursue it as an actual career? Was that right as you were going to college? You're like, this is where I want to go? Or was it just kind of still your, this was my art credits for now?
Well, so like when I left for school, I knew that I liked music and I knew that I liked ceramics or art. So I went in as an art major, which I think for a lot of people was a big surprise, because I didn't like walk around like I was an artistic person.
Sure.
And I originally wanted to do like sculpture, like I had a ceramics experience in high school and I wanted to try more things. So, pretty quickly in undergrad, I started like welding steel and casting molds and stuff like that. And I was pretty certain that I was going to graduate with a sculpture degree.
Yeah.
And then my junior year of college, I had to take like another elective. So I took another pottery class and threw on the wheel and just became obsessed all over again. And then so from there on out, I was pottery major or ceramics major with a sculpture minor.
Was that in Pittsburgh?
It was in Western Pennsylvania, a small state school just outside of the city.
So you're in college and you're like, okay, I want to do ceramics. At what point did you move to Minnesota? Why? I'm trying to figure out this whole idea of like, I'm finishing college and I'm like, I'm going to make cool stuff. I don't know where to go. Like, what happened?
Right. So it's kind of a long voyage, and I'll try to. So I had one professor who told me that I should buy land and make pots as soon as I graduate from college, and I was like, that sounds cool. But I didn't have any money to buy land, but I liked the idea.
Like out on a farm in the middle of nowhere, or what do you mean?
Yeah, probably like somewhere in Western Pennsylvania, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And then then he retired, and another professor came in, and they were like, no, you have to apply for residencies, travel around the country, then go to graduate school. And I was like, okay, well, that's the thing that I'm going to do. Yeah. So I applied to a bunch of residencies, which is pretty common in the ceramics community.
Okay.
And I ended up at a place, at the time it was called St. Pete Clay. Now it's called Maureen Art Center in St. Petersburg, Florida. It's like in an old train station.
Cool.
And I was there for 2 years. I was a resident for 2 years. I lived there for 3 years. And I worked at High Water Clays, which is based out of Asheville, but they have a satellite store in St. Pete.
To give somebody, not to interrupt you, but to give somebody an understanding of what a residency looks like for an artist, not everyone knows what that is. Can you give an explanation of what that is? Yeah,
for ceramics, a typical residency would be you usually get free studio space and you get access to kilns.
Okay.
And then sometimes based off the residency, then you have to like do some work for the studio. So like I worked on Saturdays and I worked the front desk and I did things like loaded kilns and stuff like that. And then anytime we had large events, all of the residents got together like for exhibitions and stuff like that. And you would set up gallery shows or pottery sales and stuff like that. Or
do you still take classes and stuff while you're doing your residency? Is it like an apprenticeship in the kind of way where you're learning from anyone, or you're just kind of doing your thing? You're just kind of being a part of the community. You're just kind of doing your thing, being part of the community. I think it's a good way of like seeing how other people run their businesses. It gave me a good idea of things I did want to do as a ceramic artist, things I didn't want to do as a ceramic artist. You meet like a lot of people who are kind of like in a similar boat as you, that you kind of throughout your careers grow together. Sure. And then from there, like it's also a good place to decide where you might, if you want to go to graduate school, decide where you want to go to graduate school and get references and stuff like that. So after I left the residency, I went to Southern Illinois for 3 years for graduate school, just outside of essentially St. Louis. Okay. And you went to grad school for ceramics then?
Yeah, I went for grad school for ceramics. Yeah.
How long did it take? Like, how long is grad school for that?
Depending on the program, it can be anywhere from 2 to 3 years. Mine was 3 years, which I would recommend too. Actually, it can be kind of quick.
Sure.
You can, I mean, like, I remember after 2 years of my graduate school experience, kind of, you reach this like mid-course or like a midterm review. And I remember feeling kind of like a little burned out after that. And then thinking like, oh, well, now I have another year.
Sure.
Until my thesis. And usually by like your mid-course or mid-year review, from there on out, you're kind of like on a path to what your final thesis is going to be.
So what is it? I didn't realize you had a thesis as a like my sister has her doctorate degree, and I understand psychology. You would have one. What would a thesis even be? What was yours, I guess?
So I had to do an exhibition of my work, and then I had to have a review from a committee that I chose out of the art department. So like I had a photography professor on my committee. I had an art history professor on my committee, and then I had 2 ceramic, because we had 2 ceramic professors
Sure.
in our department. So then they were both on my committee. So like I had an exhibition, then I met with them and we talked about my work, and then they tell me whether or not I suck. If they don't want to give me a degree, or if they do want to give me a degree. And then
Sure.
I actually had to write a thesis, and different universities that they have different requirements for that. Like I had a friend who wrote a 2-page thesis, which sounds amazing. I would have loved to have written a 2-page thesis, but like ours was like 15 pages or something like that.
Okay.
So, and then the thesis gets put in the library and it's there forever.
Wow.
Which is kind of weird because, sometimes I think about like, that was like 2010 or 2011. And sometimes I'm like, what did I write? Like, I don't even remember what I wrote.
Yeah. Well, so it's so early on in the journey. Like I always tell people, you don't really, in my view, you don't really become an adult until you're like doing your own thing. It's a different part of adulthood anyways, when you're really off doing your own thing. While you're still in school, yes, you start paying your own bills and you start doing whatever, but you're still so heavily influenced by the people directly around you that you don't necessarily get to choose who these people are, because they're just in this, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they're either your parents or they're your roommates, or especially in college, it's like these professors and stuff they're not necessarily like-minded. They don't necessarily share the same values and beliefs, but you have to be around these people. So it's really hard to find out who you really are without these influences around until you're actually out of college, until you're just totally doing your own thing. How did your art change when you became off on your own thing? Like after you finished, I guess, so you went to school, you got a degree, and they said you didn't suck. What kind of stuff were you doing at that point? And then how did that change over the first like year or so of doing it on your own?
So I was pretty prepared because of my first residency. I knew that when I left school, I was going to be left with a lot of equipment that I wasn't going to have access to immediately anymore. So I sort of prepared myself to be more reliable, not having to rely on like a huge expensive equipment. And I was kind of, when I was in graduate schools, there was a lot of experimentation, did a lot of abstract stuff, did more sculptural things. And that gave me a sense of material quality and my own sense of aesthetic. And so when I left school, I knew that I needed to make something that people could connect to more easily, a vessel, a ceramic cup or something like that. So it kind of like all that experimentation gave me a better idea of how I wanted to like connect myself to an audience.
Sure. So what happens then when you like have all this student loan, which I imagine is like a lot, right? After that much schooling, how do you initially get into business? Are you like a part of some kind of collective that like sells your work for you? Do you immediately just like say, I guess I'm going to hop around these like little markets and try to pay back this loan? Like, how do you start making money and build that career out of college?
So I went to another residency immediately in Baltimore. So I did
So you've been
that.
around.
Yeah. My original intention was to start teaching. That was kind of like the big, how am I going to pay off my student loans, is I'm going to start teaching.
Yeah.
So I taught for a semester at American University, and then I taught at Corcoran College of Art and Design, which is like right across from the White House in DC.
Oh, cool.
So I was living in Baltimore, teaching in DC. I also worked at like a bronze foundry where we would like sculptors would bring in objects. We would make molds of them and then we would turn them into bronze. Like we worked on, what was his name? Ray Lewis. Is he a football player?
Yeah.
We worked on like the Ray Lewis sculpture.
Oh, like bronze statues.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The teaching thing didn't work out. So the ceramics department at American University was sort of canceled or disbanded because the printmaking studio got a big grant.
Okay.
And they needed to expand, so they got rid of ceramics. It wasn't
They just took the space for printing.
It wasn't even a part of their BFA, curriculum. It was just like a class that they offered, so they got rid of that. And then Corcoran College, they disbanded because they were mismanaging money, and they went like bankrupt or something like that. And George Washington University took them over. So that was kind of like there was some heartbreak there.
Sure.
But
so then, how did it transition then of like, well, teaching is not going to work into making what you know what I mean? Into making a living. How did that work?
I there's two avenues that I was kind of interested in exploring. One was the gallery avenue. And then one was like, I'm just going to try to find a way to sell this work myself. So I dealt with some galleries, trying to make more, expansive pieces, larger pieces, like fine art pieces.
Yeah.
And I felt like I kind of like had a hard time dealing with some gallery people. Like there was a lady in New York City who said she was starting a gallery. And so I sent her a bunch of work and then she never started the gallery and I never got the work back. And I had like a few experiences, not as bad as that one, but just
sure.
And like at the time I'm like, I need to start making some money. And so that's kind of like at the time where I feel like the concept of my work really started to come together. And so that's when everything just became about Instagram and selling my work on Instagram.
How did you, so if you had to explain to somebody, and we'll show it anyways, and obviously I'll post about it, you have a very unique style. At least everything I've looked of yours when I scrolled back for quite a while is along the same general style. I mean, they're different obviously, but it's very much you. I've never seen anyone else's stuff look like yours. I know how I've been describing it to people, but how would you describe your work to other people? Like, what does it look like? What's unique about it?
So I do a lot of like, faceted kind of architectural, a lot of planes and edges, almost gem-like objects. I do a lot of cups, especially, selling work over the internet, shipping work around the country, if not the world. Like a smaller scale seems to work best.
Sure.
I've drawn inspiration from like everything I can, like whether it's been graffiti or designer toys or, limited edition records, like all of those like ideas of people making things and selling them have like bounced around in my head and like come out in my work. I think I just wanted to make something that stood out and felt precious or special. Yeah. Cause I would like see things of mine that people had. And like back there was a time when I would just like make a traditional mug with a handle or teapot or something like that with the intentions of people using them. And I would find a lot that like they would be up on a mantle or like somewhere where like, not like object worship, but somewhere that wasn't, I didn't see them in like dishwashers, you know?
They weren't being used in that kind of way.
Yeah. So I was like, why am I doing that? Let's make these more interesting. So I think like the process also dictates what I make.
Sure.
So I do a lot of slip casting and
what is slip casting?
So slip casting is where you make a plaster mold. If you can do anything, you can make a plaster mold of a basketball. Sure. You can make a plaster mold of a shoe. Yeah. And then you take a ceramic slurry. I use like a porcelain slip, casting slip, and you pour it in a mold. The plaster in the mold starts to suck the water out of the slip. Okay. And after like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you dump out that liquid, that slip, and you end up with a ceramic shell.
Okay.
And it's kind of like an industrial process. Like if you want to replicate something over and over again, you know, to a specific, you know,
Yeah.
that's what you would use. But I like to play with it. So like I slip cast different parts and I keep them in tubs so that they stay soft.
Yeah.
And then I can take those parts and I start to build with them. So like once I get the parts, then I'm doing like a lot of cutting and pasting and reassembling things together.
Yeah.
Like I used to think about like, you know, when I first started doing this was maybe 2009, 2010. And I would think about like DJs or people who sampled music, you know, that you have all of these parts, you have all these ideas and you're cutting and splicing them and forming them into a whole, you know, like a new form. So that's kind of like what I'm doing with the pieces of slipcast parts, and everything's made out of porcelain. So in the end, it has that like fine, you know, precious feeling.
Yeah. I mean, it's very unique. What I think of immediately is Borderlands. As like random as that is, of this like industrial futuristic, but like tossed together kind of like look with it. It's super stylized. You know what I mean? Like it's obviously yours. I've never seen anything else like it. I
do like that like clustered-y nugget. I mean, it's really urban in my opinion.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
It's like houses being built up next to each other. And like I went back to Pittsburgh, or the last time I was back to Pittsburgh, you know, Pittsburgh's really hilly, and like for some reason it just dawned on me how sort of unique that city is, how everything's just like built on top of each other, butted up next to each other, or like stacked on these hills and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So kind of, I feel like maybe that has something to do with.
Have you spent any time in Europe? Like, because a lot of those old European cities, I think, would give you inspiration along that kind of line. Like I've been up in Edinburgh and stuff where, you know, the plague a long time ago, the city was built with fences, you know, not fences, but, you know, they built the walls around it, and they didn't want to build out. They just built up, and they didn't have the architects to like design this correctly. So everything's all wonky and stuff there. Right.
I went to England when I was in middle school, which is pretty cool, and went to France. But I was in Quebec City recently, not too long ago. And that's, I feel like they say that's, you know, like the closest that you're going to get to Europe in North America.
Yeah.
But yeah, like some of those, Pittsburgh's kind of the same way. I know like a lot of old cities, I suppose they were built when road systems, when cars weren't, you know, a thing. Yeah. So the way they built the roads kind of wasn't as important. Yeah. Like Pittsburgh is so hilly that you can't build the roads like in a grid system. So like everything's just like crisscrossing and following peaks and valleys. And
I feel like that's what Duluth is like in a way too. Duluth is like kind of a wild city that way. Anyway, so how did you to put things in perspective for somebody as far as like what goes into it? Because there's people out there that don't like, they don't know what art costs because they're used to buying the mass-produced Amazon, whatever, Walmart stuff, right? So they think like, wow, how can a cup be $50 or whatever? It's one cup. When realistically, the number of hours that go into it means you're paying yourself not very much, right? So how much time goes into a piece that you sell for, say, like $100? Like what would somebody get for roughly $100? But how many hours go into creating something like that for you?
So things are kind of like a 3 or 4 step process, maybe more than that. So like first I have to like come up with the concept of the piece, and then I make an object. Like sometimes I cut a chunk out of clay, or I throw on the wheel, or I do all the different processes to make a prototype, and then I make a mold of that. Right. So so now I have all these molds. So the first step is I cast everything, and the more molds I have, the more I can produce. The more space I have, the more molds I can have, that sort of stuff. Yeah. But so I pour in the molds, dump them out, and then that has to sit for 24 hours to dry. Then I can come in the next day and I open up all the things from the molds and pull all of the cast positives. Yeah. And those go in a bucket. And then I, from there, spend a day building everything. And then that has to dry. And then the next day I come back and I decorate everything, and that has to dry. And then it goes in the kiln, and I bisque fire it, and it comes out of a kiln, and I glaze it, put it back in the kiln, glaze fire it, and then I have the final object. So like time is an issue, of course. So like the more you can produce, you know, and depending on like supply and demand,
Right.
you know, the more you can charge for them.
Sure.
I like, some people are fine with like having higher prices and letting their stuff sit. I'm uncomfortable with things sitting just because of all my time in like ceramic residencies and different pottery shops and stuff. Like sometimes you see cups sit on a shelf for a long time and gather dust before they even sell. And I'm not comfortable with that. So I try to price my work where I feel like it's I'm getting paid fairly, but also that they're not sitting places. So
Sure.
like when I put things out to sell, I want them to sell fast. I don't want them to sit around.
Sure. How much does it cost? Like, what's the baseline entry if somebody wanted to get something from you? What's kind of on the lower end of the things as far as like price wise that you sell versus like what are some of the more expensive? Like, what's that price range look like?
So for like a cup, it's maybe like $45, and then once you go a little bit bigger than like a $75 range.
Yeah.
Once I start making vases or taller forms, that gets anywhere from like $125 to $200.
Do you do a lot of commission then for like the bigger stuff, or do you make it and then sell it just based on I like how this looks, I'm going to make this?
I only like to make things. I only like when I have something available. Like I've done some commissions and what the person sort of like has in their head never.
It's never going to be that.
Yeah, never meets the expectation of what they imagine. So I feel like people are always like a little bit disappointed. Ceramics is really, it can be hit and miss once you put something in a kiln.
Sure.
It's every time you fire a pot, it's a bit of a guess.
Sure.
And I think and also like there's an addiction to some of the more unpredictable processes of ceramics yield the most interesting pieces.
Yeah.
So you're kind of rolling, if that's the kind of ceramics you're into, that's the kind of ceramics I'm into, like runny glazes, things cracking.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a risk that your things are going to fail, or they're just not going to be what people expect sometimes. You know?
Yeah. Commissions work for, I mean, so I do a lot of commissions for people. I just got commissioned to paint some shoes and stuff for a few different people,
Right.
But I always have to tell them like, dude, I'm not as good at art as you think I am. I do what I do, and that's like it. So you can't, if you want me to paint something for you, just be aware that it's just going to be something along the lines of the styling of what I paint. And you don't have to hire me because I don't depend on like art by any means for like my finances, but it's going to be whatever I want to make. Like, that's it. I don't want to make something that I'm making just because I think you're going to like it, because you probably won't, the only way I'll do it is if people understand that it's going to be like, hey, this is just going to be something that I like. So I hope you like what I normally make, because it's going to be something along those lines. And so far I've yet to have anyone be disappointed, but I also don't do it like full time for a living by any means. So it takes a week to make something or more.
Yeah.
How many pieces do you make at a time then? You must be making a dozen more. How many do you make? How many are in the process at any point in time?
I probably only finish maybe 10 a week.
Oh, okay.
And I'll fire once a month, and then like some things I sell online, and then some things I send out to different galleries.
Sure. And you're able to make a living off of just that many pieces?
Well,
kind of,
yeah. I do things like teaching. Right now I'm making crowns, like teeth.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Which is kind of like a ceramic process in itself. It's kind of like pottery for people's mouths. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I guess all pottery is for people's mouths, really, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like I try to explain to people, like I had a girl come into my shop the other day and she was talking about how she really wants to be an author, but everyone keeps telling her like, well, what's your real job going to be then? Right. And I'm like, well, yeah, it is hard to make full-time living off a lot of these creative outlets. However, that doesn't mean you can't space it out. Most people that I've met that do creative endeavors, they have several streams of income, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of usually how it goes.
It's all a hustle, and like sometimes you're not supposed to talk about your side hustle, but I think it's like a huge part of it, and you just kind of like have to figure out what you're okay with doing on the side, if you're okay with doing anything at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've tried doing a lot of things. I've even taught here in Minnesota at a Northern Clay Center. Grants is always a really good way, especially in Minnesota. Minnesota has a lot of art grants. So I've applied and received the Jerome grant. I've applied and received the McKnight fellowship grant.
Sure.
And that always helps.
And they give you grants just to create work for what? Like, what's kind of obviously it's to encourage making stuff.
Right.
But
Sometimes like the Jerome grant, that one was like more specific. Like I had to come up with a list of materials that I wanted, or,
yeah.
Or like what I was going to use the money for. And they wanted like receipts and stuff like that. Whereas the Big Night, that one is just like a big lump sum. And you're going to have to, I had to do like a workshop for them.
Okay.
And then I had to do an exhibition for them.
Cool.
But for the most part, you could kind of do whatever you wanted.
Sure.
They weren't like watching what you were doing with that money.
Gotcha. Cool. When did you move to Minnesota? And then right now we're sitting in, I guess it is a garage that you've renovated to become your studio. Like,
yeah.
What was the timeline of that? And like, how beneficial is it to you, or why did you want to specifically have a studio in your home rather than, like a collaboration space where other people are all working? So
I've always wanted a home studio, just because I like to be able to wake up in the morning and decide if I want to brush my teeth before I go to the studio, or even get dressed. I can just start working.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time working in home spaces, and it's never, my living situation has never stopped me from making work. So I've made ceramics in kitchens. I've made ceramics in basements. When I first moved to Minnesota, I ended up in a situation where I lived in a studio apartment in Loring Park, which is like downtown.
Yeah.
And I had a big walk-in closet, and that's where I was like making ceramics.
Oh God.
And like it never, like I'll talk to like people who've recently graduated or young people, and I'll be like, "Are you making work?" And they're like, "Oh no, I'd love to, but I just don't have the space right now." It's like, you always have the space.
Yeah.
Like you can make work anywhere. The hard part is the kiln situation, but if you're living in a city, most places have an art center somewhere with a kiln. And if you just go, ask nicely or do some work for them or just plain beg, you could probably fire your work.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing with anything creative. If you're looking for an excuse, you're going to find one for why you can't do it.
Yeah.
That's always going to be the case. The people who succeed and end up doing it, they found ways to work around all of these problems and issues that came up. And now they're finally in a place where they've kind of figured it out. When I opened my shop, I didn't know how to handle all of the problems that came up. So the first year was really difficult because different issues kept popping up. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. The fire department just told me I need to get whatever. I need to have a door here or something. You know what I mean? Stuff like with the building where I'm like, I don't even know how to do this type of a thing. Or I got broken into a couple times and I'm like, I don't know how to handle the insurance with it. Like who's responsible for replacing the windows? And you kind of figure it all out. If you're looking for an excuse for this to be a problem, say, well, now I can't do it. Like I said, you're going to find them. So we're sitting in your garage right now that you clearly must have done work to. What's the story behind how you got this and kind of why? How did you build this up?
So during the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, had been firing my work at Northern Clay Center. I lived at a different location, and they closed down. And I had just received the Big Night grant.
Was this during the pandemic? Is that why they shut down? Or?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They shut down classes and stuff.
Yep.
So I didn't have access to the studio for a while, and I had a bunch of money saved up from that big McKnight grant that I'd gotten. And so it was like, all right, I need to get a house because, as a renter, you can't really install a kiln in your basement. The landlords kind of find that suspect.
Sure.
So I was like, I got to get my own place. So my wife and I were looking around, and at the time it was really competitive. It probably still is really competitive in Minneapolis to buy a house.
Everywhere. The market's nuts.
Yeah. So we ended up finding this place, or we saw it like on the internet. My wife was like, this place has a ceramic studio in the garage. And I was like, let me take a look.
It already had one?
It already had a ceramic studio. And so I was looking, I was like, oh, that's Aaron's work. And I recognized the work in the photograph. And so our realtor contacted them. And sure enough, it was this artist, Erin Paradis, who her and her husband lived here. And I think she had received a grant or something. I'm just guessing, speculating. I could be totally wrong, but
sure.
She was the one who, or maybe her husband, they like put up the walls and they ran electricity out here with a power box so they could install the kiln. So it was like total coincidence, luck, that we even got the house.
Wow. So you didn't have to spray all this insulation or do any of this stuff?
I didn't have to do any of it, no. Which, I'm humble about. I'm very grateful that, what are the chances that you find a house that already has a ceramic studio?
Yeah. I mean, that's extremely unlikely. And you said, correct me if you're wrong, you said your wife does ceramics?
Yeah, no? we actually met. She was taking classes, and I had been teaching at Northern Clay Center, and she taking classes, and I ran into her once her classes were done and asked her if she wanted to go get a drink or something. So, cool. I'm doing ceramics every single day, and she is a graphic designer, works downtown and has a passion for drawing, doodling, painting, working with her hands. So often or not on the evenings or weekends, whenever, she'll come in and make some pots as well.
Oh, cool. So it's for her, it's just more of a passion side project, but she has this perfect teacher and all this equipment right here. So like, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of perfect. As far as your favorite things, it's really hard when someone says like, what's your favorite movie? Like maybe you know yours immediately, but I think of a bunch of them, people ask me like, who's been your favorite guest? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to pick favorites. It's like picking your favorite child.
Right.
Not quite, but still,
right.
But what is one of your favorite things that you've been able to make? Can you describe it so we can kind of like paint it in our heads?
Well, that's, I thought it was pretty interesting. The first grant that I got when I came to Minneapolis, I purchased a 3D printer.
Oh, cool.
And I had been like lusting to work with a 3D printer for a long time. And this one, printed in clay. So learning the process which was a lot of fun. It was really slow and time consuming, and I'm more like hands-on than watching a robot make my work. But the sort of effect that process gives clay, you can only get any other way. You can't get any other way.
Yeah.
So learning how to 3D print was fun. And then I was able to take those pieces and I made molds of them.
Okay.
So that I could incorporate that into my slip cast work.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to be able to take like, 3D printed world and then bring that into my everyday body of work.
Yeah.
So some of the pieces that I make, some of the parts are hand built, but then like there are still some pieces that are remnants or examples of that 3D printing process.
Cool. Yeah. I always tell people like, it's funny as you get good at one thing, people start to view you as an expert, right? And then you almost, I don't know if it's an ego thing or what, but you don't want to look like you're a newbie at things again. Like you don't want to look like you're trash at something, right? So people tend to just keep working on what they're good at.
Right.
But really, like if you look at all the things available to you, technology and stuff, even if you're bad at it, if you can at least start to learn the basics at that, you now have more tools to incorporate into what you're good at, and it's only going to benefit you. It's just like sometimes hard to pull the trigger and be like, okay, I'm going to try to learn this really basic stuff I don't know anything about, like sitting on YouTube. Like this is how bad this is. People have told me constantly that I need to have a TikTok and just like put little snippets from episodes or something up on there,
Okay, yeah.
like because I know other podcasters that do that and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think TikTok's going to be around long term in my personal opinion, and I don't want to do it. I felt like I was too old for it. Whatever. It was so bad that this week I YouTubed how does TikTok work.
Oh, right.
Because like I straight up don't know how to use it at all, and like downloaded the app. I put a quick one snippet on there a few days ago. Haven't looked at it because I haven't done anything really. But when I did look, 0 views entirely. Like I have no idea how it works at all. But I know how Instagram works really well. But if I could learn how to use it, I could probably incorporate it and get a little bit better. As far as those things go, you're really good at what you do. Obviously, that's why like you have a style. I was at a bar last night. And I mentioned to the bartender that at the joint that I was going to be interviewing a ceramics artist tomorrow.
Okay.
And he goes, oh, who? And then I said your name, and he was like, oh, his stuff's really cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And this dude's like in his 50s and or something like that, a bartender downtown in Eau Claire, not around here, but he likes to, I guess, do ceramics on the side. And he knew who you were. Yeah. It was like, dang, small world. This is cool. So you're known for what you do for sure. What areas within what you do would you say are your strengths that you're like really stoked, you're really good at these things? What are some areas that you're not good at? People might be surprised, like, what do you mean Brett doesn't know how to do that?
I actually don't know a whole lot about like materials for mixing glazes. Okay. Like out of all of the things I've focused on, that was one of the things I didn't do, which sometimes doesn't bother me at all. But sometimes I'm like, man, it would be cool if I could like get a glaze that looked like that. And I just don't have the knowledge. Like glazes are essentially it's like, baking or like any sort of recipe. They're made up of different percentages of things.
Yeah.
And the more you add of different things, get different effects or different colors. So, but like everything's online. So there's like lists and lists and lists and lists of all sorts of different glazes that you can look through. And, but in the long run, I try to keep it simple. Because the more glazes you need, the more 5-gallon buckets you have sitting around your studio. So I just use 2 glazes. I use a clear on the outside and a blue seafoam green sort of color on the inside.
Yeah.
Just to keep it simple.
Yeah. I mean, I have to learn how to do this stuff. So I painted some shoes, like some Nikes for myself the other day. I just use acrylics, just being straightforward and honest with people. I just painted them because I wanted to for myself. I was just like, oh, this would be fun. So I painted them, posted on my gram, and right away I had like 3 separate people be like, dude, would you paint shoes for me? And I'm like, yeah, whatever, like cool. But I knew, I'm like, this isn't the paint I need to use. Like,
really?
I don't know how to do this. Like these are not what they need to be the quality they need to be. Right. Mm-hmm. So I spent time Googling it, looked up, ended up finding this company called Liquid Kicks, which apparently is like the biggest one. This dude, Jeff Chamberlain, he was painting on like Nikes. He's a graffiti artist and stuff. And he was painting on Nikes for musicians and big people and whatever. And he was finding that he couldn't get the right chemicals for it to like be what he needed for that use. Right.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So he created the chemicals he needed for the top coats and stuff. So that way they'd be flexible and they would work with whatever. And he built a whole business around it. And like now it's huge. I just Googled them, found them on Instagram, went to their website. They have all these different sheens and stuff. So I found the tech support number, called it, and ended up talking to Jeff, the owner. I was on the phone with this dude for like 20 minutes and he's explaining exactly how to prep the shoe and how to do all this stuff before he goes like, do you know who you're talking to? And I'm like, no. And he goes, how did you find this number? And I'm like, it's on the website. And he goes, oh, yeah, my number's not supposed to be on that website. Yeah. It's like, oh. And he's like, but this is cool. I'm driving. So I ended up talking to him for like an hour. But anyways, the long story short is because of him, I was able to figure out exactly which paints are made from what brand or whatever, specifically for painting on Air Force Ones.
Oh, nice.
How to prep the leather ahead of time, how to do all of that stuff. So I have all of those materials in now, so I can start trying to do it. I'm going to do it on my own shoes first because tomorrow the first pair of shoes I'm supposed to commission are already coming in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I'm like, I can't paint these without knowing for sure that I have this process figured out. So I got to quick figure that out this week.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
I'm super excited about it, actually. I didn't start doing any art till I was like 28.
Yeah.
I was never an art kid. But when I was going through my divorce, I was really depressed and was trying to figure out other things to do, to distract my mind. And I got really into painting and started painting dumb little monsters. Everyone says remind them of like Monsters, Inc., which is sick. That was a good comparison, I guess.
Yeah.
And now like I'm getting hired to paint murals and now apparently painting people's Air Force One. So like it's kind of cool how that trajectory kind of went. What are the things that are on your list now? Because obviously like you're pretty accomplished in your space. What are kind of like the goals that you still have to reach? Do you want to sell something for $1 million? Do you want to build a house? I'm sure that's not it, but like what are the goals that you actually have?
I think I would like to get into making some larger pieces again. Yeah. I used to make larger work, and then once everything became so internet, like selling a lot of work on Instagram and stuff like that, the scale came down a lot. So I want to make some larger work. That's, like more my ceramics world. Yeah, but kind of like, with all the things that you're doing and now painting shoes and stuff like that, like I get like little things that I get obsessed with. Like I used to be obsessed with frying chicken, and now I'm obsessed with making pizzas.
That's why we're going to have this wood-fired pizza.
Yeah, we're going to have some wood-fired pizza when we're done here. And that, if you came back like this time next year, who knows? I could, be making handmade noodles for all I know. Like,
sure.
I used to play a lot of music in high school, so I used to play like a lot of guitar and stuff like that. And then I went to college and got into ceramics and let that go. And now that I'm like a little bit more settled, have this house and stuff like that, I've been allowing myself to enjoy guitar again. So like I'll come in here and I'll noodle on my guitar in the studio while things are drying, and then When things are ready, then I'll go back to work. So I like switch back and forth sometimes, just to make it interesting.
I think when you do other creative outlets, it really helps pull into your original thing. I think that, like, for me anyways, when I get stuck in artist blocks, that's the best way to do it, is to just go do one of my other creative things that I'm doing, and typically I get ideas. Is that kind of how you get past artist blocks too, or how do you do it?
So I've been definitely okay with just like, there's been times when working in the studio is not fun, and I just know it's not going to be fun, but I still do it.
Yeah.
And you always kind of get past those moments and you discover things, like things happen slowly sometimes.
Yeah.
Like playing guitar, I've been doing like a lot of like surfy chords and surfy notes. And it makes me think about when I was a kid, how I always assumed that I would just grow up and know how to surf. Like I thought like people just became adults and then like surfing was something that they did when they wanted to.
Yeah.
And so like part of me like playing like these surfy guitar chords, like it's in the back of my head, I'm like, do I need to go surfing now? Like, it's like, is this gonna be the, ceramics, playing guitar? Is that going to be the bridge in a weird way to going and trying how to learn how to surf?
Yeah, I think, long term, we're going to have to like collaborate on this and find two houses next to each other on a beach in some random country. Cause my goal when I retire is to sit and paint on the beach / surf every day.
Oh, really?
So you can be the one doing the ceramics, and then I'll be doing the painting, and then we'll have our own little art shows.
Have you surfed before?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's really hard.
I bet. It seems really
and
hard.
I've like skateboarded and snowboarded like my whole life, and I've wakeboarded and longboarded, and I've like done all of them, and I went surfing in Hawaii. And on the first wave, I was able to stand up on it, but I had an instructor telling me like, now's when you paddle, and whatever. Went to Peru, same thing. I had an instructor, no problem. I can get up on waves. Not kidding. I went and rented a board without an instructor recently down in Florida. It was a cheap board, but still got smoked, broke the board.
Oh, really?
Seriously, snapped
it in half. I feel
half.
like you get bragging rights for breaking a board, right?
I don't think so. The dude was not stoked.
Okay.
But
okay.
Yeah. But no, it's really, really hard. I think the hardest part for me, and what a lot of people say, is being able to catch the wave at the right time, knowing like when this wave's way off in the distance that it's going to break at this spot, and this is when to paddle and whatever. But surfing, that's magical. And as I get older, my body breaks down faster.
Sure.
I was just explaining to you earlier that like, what did I sleep on my knee wrong? And I'm like limping. I don't know. But surfing, there's like less impact and it's much more muscle. Like it's best workout of anything I've ever done. But it's interesting how different arts and stuff can pull you into these headspaces. And it's the same thing with music, right? Is like music it has this strange power of, if you hear a certain song that you associate with a memory, that a song will play and you just like so clearly can picture something that happened 15 years ago just based on the song. It's cool how art can have like that kind of a thing. So where then is your art going from here? Are you going to stay on Instagram and just continue to kind of like build that, or what direction? Obviously you want to make some bigger pieces. Are you going to kind of just stay on the path you're at? Are you just in a good zone? Where are things going to go? I
think that maybe it's time that I do a website for myself again. I used to have a website for myself, but then at a certain point I decided that it wasn't necessary. But I don't know how long Instagram's gonna be a thing for. It could be around for a while. I don't know what's gonna happen. So it's good to have like other areas where people can reach out to get your work. So like I might do a website and continue like working with galleries here and there. Like I work with Northern Clay Center. They do the American Pottery Festival every summer, or I guess it's kind of like late summer.
Is that in the cities area? Where is that?
Yeah, that's over. It's on Franklin Avenue.
The festival. Where's the festival at? Is that in the cities?
Yeah, it's in the Northern Clay Center.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's like a 3-day kind of like, it's a nice mix of pottery sales / like gallery show.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like their big fundraiser for a year, and they do wood fire pizzas. They were my inspiration for wood fire pizzas.
Cool.
I don't know if it's going to be in person this year. The last few years it was strictly online, but it used to be like a big party for 3 days.
Cool.
That I'd get invited to and show work. Right now I have work at Plow Gallery. And I have a link on my Instagram to their website. But
cool.
Yeah.
Dope. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see everything that comes out. I'm excited to get this second that you showed me.
Oh, yeah.
So that's definitely going to go on my mantle. It's time to get to that point of the show. I ask this on every episode because they're my favorite questions. When you pursue something you're passionate about for a living, it's not usually like financial gains that you get really excited about. It's like meeting this person that you've looked up to forever, finally accomplishing this kind of goal or whatever. Can you share a story of a unique experience, something specific that you're really grateful for, but it only happened because you chose to pursue your passion for ceramics?
Yep. So when I was in graduate school, we had a visiting artist come to do a workshop named Krista Assad. And I was kind of like my responsibility to pick her up at her hotel every morning and take her to the art building.
Cool.
And she happened to like have grown up in Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah.
So like we had that like in common. I got to know her. And then the following year she was doing a workshop at Haystack, which is in Maine. And it's like a camp environment or for craft. So they'll do like fibers, fine metals, ceramics, glass. I think they have like a wood shop too.
Yeah.
And so she was doing a 2-week workshop there, and she invited me to come assist her for 2 weeks. And so like
cool.
the moment where like I sort of like found myself in this moment, I was like, wow, like I never saw this coming. This is wonderful. It's 2 weeks, and the Saturday in between those 2 weeks, they have a lobster dinner on the rocks, down on the shores of Maine. So it's like, like I'm like sitting on this huge rock, and there's waves crashing behind me, and I'm like breaking a whole lobster, which I've never done before. Like, slurping up its juices and stuff and squeezing a lemon all over it, dipping it and pouring butter all over myself in the lobster.
I'm just picturing the Little Mermaid with the water splashing up at the fancy dinner.
Yeah. Then we threw the Little Mermaid in a pot of boiling water. That was just like a beautiful moment. And when I was there, when I was first in Maine, it was really just all about working for Krista and running this workshop successfully and making work. And then just recently, this last summer, I got to go back with my wife for our honeymoon. And we drove all the way up and down the coast of Maine over the course of a week or so, and kind of got to like relive that moment a little bit and explore more of,
Sure.
based off of this one memory I had.
Wow, that's awesome. Are you familiar with the term imposter syndrome?
Oh, yep, I know what that is.
Yeah, it's horrible, and a lot of us face it. Have you struggled with that, and was there ever a moment where you kind of like realized, no, I do belong here, such as that? Like, a lot of people would go into that and say, dang, I don't think I should have been the one to be working on this. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I can remember, I've been doing ceramics for so long, so I never quite felt like an imposter, but I remember one time it was like the first, group show I entered in, and they like gave out awards, like best in show sort of thing. And I remember like receiving a letter in the mail with a check that I had like won, like third place or something like that, or I'd gotten an honorable mention. And I remember feeling weird, like I'd done something wrong. Like I was like, what did I do? Like, they're like, your piece is going to be put in the permanent collection. And I was like, what did I do? I was like, was that a good piece? I was like, I hope it's not cracked. Is it cracked? No, I don't think it was cracked. Why would it be cracked? Like that sort of like in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
I think that was like the strongest sense of imposter syndrome. Just like anything else, there can be like cliques, or like, in the ceramics community, like there's sometimes you get a sense of like, this is the identity of a potter, which I don't necessarily subscribe to. Like, I think like anybody can be a ceramic artist. There's no like one identity to a ceramic artist, but
right. Yeah, well, I mean, people end up, in general, they get in a zone and everyone gets, thinks of this person for that. Yeah. Like with me, everyone thought of me as like the skateboarding person in my town, because I've been skateboarding in that city forever. It's not like I was the best at skateboarding. I'm not trying to claim that crown, but I was just very involved in the fundraising and everything. And then when I opened the shop, then I really became like, this is the skateboarding guy. Did a lot of the fundraising stuff. I'm the one that's always in the news about like the park getting built and like all that type of stuff. When I then did the podcast, everyone was like, oh yeah, I'd listen. I don't skate though. I'm like, why would you? I'm not even interviewing people about skateboarding. And then I'd have other people, friends of mine in the cities or something, say, yeah, I'd listen, but I don't live in Eau Claire. I don't care about people in Eau Claire. And I'm like, dude, it's not about Eau Claire. Well, you just assume because I'm a downtown business owner, I'm only known for Eau Claire or skateboarding specifically. So
Right.
trying to like break out of that and be like, no, I do other stuff. Like I'm a scuba diver. You probably didn't even know that. You know what I mean? Like I love
Yeah.
doing other things. And with art, that has been my most recent imposter syndrome problem is like, I don't think my art's that good, but like other people seem to like it. I keep getting hired for stuff and then they
Right.
seem really excited when it's done. So I'm trying to overcome that and accept it. Like I got the Chippewa Valley Best of Awards. It's like our area's like annual award thing.
Okay.
And I won Best Local Podcast back-to-back years, which was sweet. But then I also on this year won, along with some other people as part of a collective, but still we won second best new mural in town. And that was the first mural I've ever painted ever. And I keep telling people, I'm like, I didn't deserve to win that. Like I definitely didn't deserve to win that. People are voting for me for like the show and then went and voted for me for that. But, I was talking to my partner about it and I was like, but if it wasn't good, people wouldn't have voted for it.
Right.
Like even if they were like, they like me because of the show, they still wouldn't have voted for it if they didn't at least think it was good. So even if it wasn't the second best one, it must be good.
I mean, I think it's good to, approach it with some humility and,
Of course, yeah.
not take yourself too seriously. And
Right.
yeah, if people liked it, people liked it. You can't dictate that. Like every time I make a mug, I can say like, this is a coffee mug, but as far as I know, like someone's drinking orange juice out of it. You can't control what happens to the art that you make.
That's very true. You have to be able to navigate things like that, when something unexpected happens. I talked about mistakes earlier and I've made mistakes and I used to in every episode give my own experience as well as like my own mistake experience, except I've said them a million times. I don't think that many people want to listen to me talk about my stories anymore. For you, can you share a story of a mistake you made that taught you something valuable that somebody listening might be able to benefit from?
Yeah, it kind of like goes back to what I was talking about earlier about when I was younger, a little bit younger, trying to work with more fine art galleries. And I was talking with a gallery in New York City with a guy, and we'd had some phone conversations. And I was like trying to work with him to try to make some work that he wanted, based off of what I do. And so like we would have a phone conversation. And I would go back to my studio and sort of work on some things. And then I would show it to him and he'd be like, well, I don't know. Well, like maybe like more like this. And so I jumped through some hoops. And then finally, after jumping through some hoops, I was like, I can't just like make work that's not showing. I need to start selling some work. And I just emailed him and I was like, no, this isn't working. I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't going to happen. And, I don't know if that was necessarily a mistake, but what the mistake was I just like pulled the cord when I should have expressed myself about why this wasn't working for me.
Yeah.
I think that would have been more constructive,
Yeah. Yeah.
But in that moment, I was just like kind of hungry, like really trying to get the ball rolling for myself. So I just like, I pulled the cord on that one and like, tried something different.
Well, the thing is like closing doors is what really sucks, because the community is not that big. It really isn't. Like as much, the world's a big place, right? But the ceramics community of professionals isn't really that huge of a place, and that's how it is with a lot of things. Within even entertainment, as big as that is, it's not that massive of a community. So if somebody doesn't particularly love your work ethic or doesn't love an experience with you or whatever, that person probably knows a lot of other people that you're going to end up running into or talking to. So if you can, like talk, and the thing is most people are very understanding if you explain like what's going on. And there could be a plethora of reasons. You're having a kid, right? So like you could just be like, hey man, like I got to deal with stuff like with parenthood. I didn't think about how much time was going to go into making this, crib, and people would understand if you just like explained, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it just kind of recently like popped into my head thinking about it. Like after it happened, I let go and I was just like focused on getting some cups out there and stuff. Yeah. But recently I was like, I I could have maybe expressed myself better.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of growing, but that's okay. So again, where can people go find you if they want to like get one of these sweet cups? Because I'm going to have one. Where would they be able to go find your work if you have a website popping or whatever? Where could they go find it, and how could they get in contact with you if they wanted to work with you of some kind, or if they wanted to buy something, or if they just had a question for you? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so be friendly at gmail.com, BFREUNDLY. I have work at Northern Clay Center regularly. I have work currently at Plow Gallery. I have some cups that are going to be at the Unomi show at Acar Design, or Clay Acar, which is in Iowa City. And yeah, just mostly through Instagram. I do all my updates there and share all the links.
Cool. Yeah. So everyone can hop on there. They can find me on Instagram at PassionPod if you don't follow me already, which I think is starting to happen now. I built a lot of the listenership through Instagram, but I kind of think it's starting to switch a little bit where I have enough reviews and stuff on the internet that people are discovering the show first.
Oh yeah.
So you can find me on Instagram. That's the easiest place. If you want to support anything that I do, you can go to my store, Passion Board Shop. There's all kinds of stuff there. Passion is like my brand, so I got lots of apparel and stuff that way, but Instagram, that's the easiest way to hit me up that I am going to see. I definitely check all of my, all my message requests and stuff. I always make sure I check those at least a few times a week. So super easy to get a hold of me. Thanks again for having us here.
Yeah,
this was really cool coming and seeing the whole thing, and I'm really hungry. So we gotta eat these pizzas.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.